Saturday morning sunshine warmed the neighborhood park. Daniel Carter, 35, watched his 6-year-old daughter Lily on the swings when he noticed two small twin girls cornered by a 12-year-old boy near the playground. The boy was pulling their matching braids and laughing as they cried. Daniel strode over immediately, his firm voice stopping the bully mid-taunt. "That's enough, son. Leave them alone." The boy scurried away. A woman in a cream business suit rushed over, breathless. "I'm their mother. Thank you." Their eyes met with unexpected intensity. Daniel nodded. Just doing what's right. Neither knew their pasts held a devastating secret. Daniel Carter had once been Sterling Aerospace's most brilliant propulsion engineer, his innovative safety protocols earning recognition throughout the aviation industry. 6 years had passed since he'd walked away from that prestigious career. Abandoning everything the morning after burying his wife Sophia, the official investigation into the test flight crash that killed her had been swift, conclusive, and quietly buried beneath layers of corporate bureaucracy and legal settlements. They called it pilot error, combined with mechanical failure, an unfortunate accident that couldn't have been prevented. Daniel knew better, had seen the rushed approval signatures, the ignored safety warnings, but knowing and proving were different battles entirely, and he had a daughter to raise alone. Now he worked as an equipment maintenance engineer for a smaller manufacturing company, trading prestige and 6-figure salaries for peace of mind and flexible hours. His entire world revolved around Lily braiding her hair each morning with practiced fingers, packing lunches with handwritten notes that made her giggle during recess, attending every school play and parent-teacher conference with devoted attention. He had become both mother and father, filling their modest 2-story home with enough love to mask the absence that still echoed in its corners during quiet moments. Lily had inherited her mother's deep brown eyes and curious spirit, and every time she smiled, Daniel saw Sophia's soul living on through their daughter. The woman from the park haunted his thoughts that evening as he prepared dinner. Something about her seemed inexplicably familiar. Perhaps the determined set of her jaw, or the way she held herself with practiced authority. Despite the momentary panic in her eyes when she'd seen her daughters in distress, he couldn't place where he might have seen her before, but the feeling persisted like an itch he couldn't scratch. Ava Blake had built walls around herself that few dared to scale, each brick mortared with ambition and sealed with cold efficiency. At 34, she commanded Sterling Aerospace with the kind of calculated precision that made board members nervous and competitors wary of her next move. She had climbed the corporate ladder with singular focus, each rung a carefully orchestrated step away from the poverty of her childhood in rural Kentucky. Being a single mother to twin daughters, Emma and Ella hadn't softened her public persona. If anything, motherhood had sharpened her edge. She couldn't afford weakness. Not when she carried secrets that could destroy everything she'd built over the past 6 years. The twins were her only vulnerability, the single crack in her otherwise impenetrable armor. She'd never told them about their father, a brief relationship with a marketing executive that had ended before she discovered she was pregnant. The girls had learned not to ask about him, sensing the pain that flickered across their mother's usually composed face whenever the subject arose. Ava provided them with everything money could buy: private tutors who came to the house, piano lessons with the city's best instructor, enrollment at the most exclusive preparatory school. But she knew in her heart she couldn't purchase what they needed most: a complete family with a father figure. That Saturday night, as she tucked Emma and Ella into their matching beds, they couldn't stop talking about the man who had saved them from the mean boy. He was like a superhero. "Mommy," Ella whispered, her small hand clutching her mother's. "And he had a daughter just like us, with braids and everything." Ava smoothed their hair, her mind involuntarily drifting to those kind green eyes that had looked at her without the usual calculation or recognition, only genuine concern. She didn't recognize him then, but something deep in her chest had tightened when their hands briefly touched as he helped steady Emma. Later in her home office, Ava pulled up old employee files from Sterling Aerospace's database, a habit she'd developed whenever someone felt familiar but unplaceable. When Daniel Carter's personnel photograph appeared on her screen, Her blood turned to ice in her veins. She remembered him now, the brilliant engineer who had designed revolutionary safety protocols that could have transformed aviation standards. He'd left abruptly 6 years ago, just days after the TR-7 incident. Her fingers trembled as she closed the laptop. Some connections were better left unmade. Some truths better left buried. But fate rarely respected such preferences. The universe seemed determined to entangle their lives. The following Saturday, at the same park, their daughters found each other like magnets drawn together by invisible force. Lily had been reading under a sprawling oak tree when Emma and Ella approached, shy but determined to make friends. Within minutes, the three girls were inseparable, creating elaborate games that only 6-year-olds could understand, their laughter mixing like music. Daniel and Ava watched from separate benches, occasionally catching each other's eyes with the resigned smiles of parents whose children had made their social choices. "I suppose we should properly introduce ourselves," Daniel said, walking over with an extended hand and an easy smile. "Daniel Carter. And that whirlwind over there is my daughter Lily." "Ava Blake," she replied, her professional mask sliding automatically into place even as she shook his warm hand. "Emma and Ella. Though I can never predict which tornado will strike first on any given day." They talked while their daughters played, conversation flowing with surprising naturalness. Daniel spoke about Lily's obsession with astronomy, how she insisted on checking for stars even on cloudy nights, how she'd memorized all the constellations visible from their latitude. Ava found herself genuinely laughing, really laughing for the first time in months, as she described the twins' latest architectural attempt to build a fort that had somehow involved every pillow, blanket, and piece of furniture in their house, including somehow dismantling part of the dining room table. "You're different from what I expected," Daniel said suddenly, then caught himself with slight embarrassment. "I mean, from that first day, you seemed so cold, controlled, unapproachable," Ava supplied with a bitter smile playing at her lips. "Occupational hazard, I'm afraid. Running a major company doesn't leave much room for warmth or vulnerability." "Sterling Aerospace," Daniel said quietly, and Ava's breath caught in her throat. "I know the company well. Used to work there, actually, years ago." The moment stretched between them like a taut wire, heavy with unspoken questions and carefully buried history. Ava wanted to run, to grab her daughters, and never return to this park where fate seemed determined to unravel her carefully constructed life. But Emma chose that precise moment to race over, grabbing her mother's hand with sticky fingers. "Mommy, can Lily come to our house for a play date tomorrow? Please? We want to show her our telescope." Looking at her daughter's hopeful face, then at Daniel's kind eyes that held no recognition of her role in his tragedy, Ava made a decision that would change everything irrevocably. "Of course, sweetheart. If her father agrees to it." Daniel nodded, smiling at the girl's excitement. "I think that sounds wonderful. What time should we come over?" Weeks transformed into months, autumn leaves giving way to winter snow, and the two families grew closer with each passing day. Daniel found himself eagerly anticipating their park meetings, looking forward to the way Ava's professional facade would crack when one of the girls told a particularly silly joke. She had started wearing her hair down on weekends, he noticed. Soft waves replacing the severe bun, and casual clothes that made her look younger, more approachable, more human. For Ava, Daniel represented something she'd never allowed herself to want: genuine connection without agenda or calculation. He didn't care about her money, her position, or her corporate influence. He laughed at her terrible puns, helped her when Emma skinned her knee, taught all three girls to throw a proper football spiral, and never pressed when she grew quiet and distant, lost in thoughts she couldn't share. He was patient in a way that both comforted and terrified her. The girls had unilaterally decided they were sisters. No discussion needed or vote taken. They insisted on matching outfits when the families went on outings together to the zoo, where Daniel somehow carried all three girls on his shoulders simultaneously, to the beach, where Ava taught Lily to build sandcastles with architectural precision and proper foundation engineering. to the local autumn fair, where they shared cotton candy, and Daniel won stuffed animals for each girl at the ring toss game. I haven't seen Lily this happy since. Daniel paused one evening in November, watching the girls chase fireflies in Ava's expansive backyard. They were alone on the porch, glasses of wine untouched beside them, the air crisp with approaching winter. Since your wife, Ava, finished, softly, her voice barely above a whisper. She knew about Sophia, had read the obituary multiple times, studied the investigation report, had memorized every detail of the tragedy she'd helped create without fully understanding the consequences. She would have loved this, Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion he rarely allowed himself to feel, seeing Lily with sisters. Sophia always wanted more children, wanted a big family. Ava's hand found his in the darkness, squeezing gently with an understanding born of shared loneliness. The weight of her secret pressed against her chest like a physical thing, but she pushed it down into the locked box where she kept all her guilt. She had learned to live with that weight, to compartmentalize it into something manageable that she only opened in the darkest hours of sleepless nights. But sitting here with Daniel, feeling the warmth of his calloused hand, watching their daughters play the box, was cracking open despite her best efforts. Ava, Daniel turned to her, his eyes serious in the porch light. I need to tell you something important. These past few months, I thought I was done with feeling anything beyond love for Lily. After Sophia died, I shut that part of myself down completely. But you've changed that. You and the girls have brought something back to life in me that I thought was gone forever. She should have stopped him. Should have pulled away, made an excuse. Ended this before it went any further down. A path that could only lead to devastation. Instead, she leaned closer, drawn by a force stronger than guilt or fear or self-preservation. When he kissed her, gentle and uncertain, she kissed him back with 6 years of loneliness and longing, tasting redemption and damnation in equal measure. The relationship deepened as autumn turned to winter. Daniel helped Ava decorate her house for Christmas. The first time she'd bothered with a tree since the twins were toddlers. Ava taught Daniel how to French braid hair properly, sitting patiently while he practiced on her before attempting Lily's thick locks. They spent Thanksgiving together, creating new traditions, each girl saying 3 things they were grateful for. Daniel's terrible turkey jokes that made everyone groan, Ava's surprisingly perfect pumpkin pie that became legendary in their small circle. On New Year's Eve, with the girls asleep upstairs after fighting to stay awake until midnight, Daniel and Ava stood on her balcony, watching fireworks paint the sky in brilliant colors. I love you, he said simply, the words carrying the weight of a man who had thought he'd never say them again to anyone but his daughter. Ava turned away, tears streaming down her face in hot trails. Daniel, there's something I need to tell you. I know you have a past, he interrupted gently, pulling her close. We both do. But I don't care about before. I only care about now. About the future we could build together. The 6 of us. 6? Ava's voice broke on the single word. I want to adopt Emma and Ella, Daniel said, his voice steady with conviction. If you'll have me. If you'll marry me. I want to be their father officially. And I want you to be Lily's mother. We could be a real family, not just 2 broken halves pretending to be whole. The proposal hung between them like the fireworks, beautiful, explosive, temporary. Ava said yes because saying no would have required explanations she couldn't give without destroying everything. She said yes because she loved him with a desperate intensity that frightened her with its power. She said yes knowing that she was building a future on a foundation of lies that would eventually, inevitably crumble into dust. Spring arrived with unusual warmth that year. Crocuses pushing through the last snow in defiant celebration. Daniel had been cleaning out the garage, making room for Ava and the twins' belongings as they prepared to merge their households when he found the box. Old files from Sterling Aerospace, documents he'd saved, thinking one day he might pursue the truth about Sophia's death when Lily was older. He almost threw them away. What good would dwelling on the past do now? But something, Perhaps Sophia's spirit or simple curiosity made him open just one folder. The technical approval signature jumped out at him like a physical blow to the chest. Ava Blake, Senior Technical Director. The date was 3 days before the fatal test flight. He recognized the systems. She'd approved the same navigation protocols he'd flagged as incomplete, requiring at least 3 more months of testing and refinement. His hands shook as he found more documents, more signatures. A clear pattern of rushed approvals to meet quarterly projections and bonus targets. Daniel called Marcus, his old colleague who had worked in quality assurance and still kept in touch occasionally. "I need to know about the TR-7 crash," he said without preamble, his voice rough. "Who pushed the approvals through despite the safety concerns?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, the silence heavy with reluctance. "Why are you digging this up now, Daniel? It's been 6 years. You've moved on. Please, Marcus, I need to know the truth." It was Blake. Ava Blake. She was gunning for the CEO position. Needed that project to succeed to secure the board's vote. She overrode 3 safety holds. Dan. We tried to stop it, but she had the authority. After the crash, the company buried everything, made it go away quietly. She became CEO 2 months later, right on schedule. The phone slipped from Daniel's numb fingers, clattering on the concrete floor. In the distance, he could hear Lily and the twins playing in the backyard, their laughter carrying on the spring breeze like mockery. Ava's voice joined them, calling them in for lunch with maternal warmth. The same voice that had whispered, "I love you" last night. The same hands that had signed his wife's death warrant. Daniel moved through the rest of the day in a dissociative haze. At dinner, he watched Ava cut Emma's meat, wipe Ella's face, help Lily with her fractions homework. She was a good mother, attentive, and loving, and patient. But she was also the reason Lily didn't have her own mother, the reason he'd spent 6 years as a widower, the reason his daughter cried on Mother's Day. That night, after the girls were asleep, Daniel placed the folder on the kitchen table with deliberate precision. "We need to talk." Ava saw the Sterling Aerospace logo, and her face went white as bone. She sank into a chair like a marionette with cut strings, her hands folded in her lap like a child awaiting inevitable punishment. "You knew," Daniel said. His voice, deadly quiet, controlled fury beneath the surface. "This whole time, you knew who I was, what you'd done to us." "Daniel, please let me explain. You killed her." The words exploded from him, months of happiness shattering in an instant. "You signed off on those systems knowing they weren't ready. You killed Sophia for a promotion, for money, for power. And then you made me fall in love with you? You let me bring you into my daughter's life?" "I didn't know about you and Lily when we met," Ava whispered, tears streaming down her face in rivers. "That day at the park was pure coincidence. But after I realized who you were, I tried to stay away. I tried, but the girls had already bonded and, don't you dare blame our daughters for your lies." "I'm not. I'm saying I fell in love with you despite knowing I had no right to. Every day I wanted to tell you. But every day, I became more of a coward because I couldn't bear to lose you all. I couldn't bear to see the love in your eyes turn to hatred." Daniel laughed bitterly, the sound sharp as broken glass. "Well, congratulations. You've lost us anyway. Mission accomplished." Ava crumbled then, 6 years of carefully constructed walls collapsing in devastating waves. "I think about her every single day." She sobbed, her body shaking. "Your wife. I read her obituary so many times I memorized it. Teacher at Riverside Elementary. Volunteer at the Literacy Center. Mother to Lily Grace. I know she taught 2nd grade. That she loved monarch butterflies. That she was learning to play guitar for the children's music program she wanted to start. I know everything about the life I stole from her, from you, from Lily. Then why?" Daniel's voice broke, raw pain replacing anger. "Why did you do it?" "Because I was ambitious and stupid and desperate, and believed the engineers who said the risk was minimal, statistically insignificant, because I thought making my daughters proud meant being powerful and successful and wealthy, because I didn't understand that one signature could destroy so many lives irrevocably. She looked up at him with ravaged eyes. I've been in prison since that day, Daniel. A prison of my own making, but prison nonetheless. Every happy moment we've shared has been stolen, and I knew it. You're going to be in a real prison soon enough, Daniel said coldly. I'm going to the authorities. The truth needs to come out, finally. I know, Ava said simply, her voice hollow. I've been preparing for this day for 6 years. My lawyers have everything ready. I won't fight it. Daniel stared at her, thrown by her easy acceptance. What about Emma and Ella? They have no one else, Ava whispered brokenly. Their father isn't in the picture. My parents are dead. They'll go into foster care, probably be separated. But that's what I deserve, isn't it? To lose everything, just like you did. The next morning, Daniel stood at his window watching Lily teach the twins a complicated hand-clapping game. They were still in their pajamas, hair messy from sleep, faces bright with innocence. In a few hours, their world would shatter just like his had 6 years ago. But they were children. They didn't choose their mother any more than Lily had chosen to lose hers. When Ava turned herself in that afternoon, the media explosion was immediate and devastating. Sterling Aerospace CEO admits to fatal cover-up. The details were sensational. A rushed approval, a deadly crash, 6 years of deception. The company's stock plummeted within hours. The board demanded immediate resignations. Federal investigators descended like vultures on carrion. Through it all, Daniel found himself in the surreal position of caring for Emma and Ella, while their mother sat in federal custody awaiting trial. The twins didn't understand why Mommy couldn't come home, why reporters kept trying to talk to them, why some of their friends weren't allowed to play with them anymore. Is Mommy bad? Ella asked one night, curled against Daniel's side while he read them a bedtime story. Your mommy made a mistake, Daniel said carefully, his heart breaking for these innocent children. A very big mistake that hurt people. But that doesn't mean she doesn't love you with all her heart. Do you hate her? Emma asked, her voice small and frightened. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with his own demons. I'm very angry with her, he finally said. But hate is a heavy thing to carry, and I'm trying to put it down. The trial lasted 3 excruciating weeks. Ava pled guilty to all charges: criminal negligence, involuntary manslaughter, falsifying technical documents, conspiracy to obstruct justice. She stood before the court in a simple black suit, her voice steady as she detailed every decision, every cover-up, every lie with unflinching honesty. When Daniel took the stand, the prosecutor asked him to describe his wife, the life they'd built, the daughter left motherless. His testimony was factual, controlled, until the prosecutor showed a picture of Sophia holding baby Lily at her first birthday party. She was everything, Daniel said, his voice finally breaking. She made our house a home. She sang Lily to sleep every night, the same song her mother had sung to her, "You are my sunshine." She volunteered at the literacy center, teaching adults to read with infinite patience. She was learning to play guitar because she wanted to start a children's music group at the library. She had so many plans, so much life left to live. She was supposed to watch Lily grow up, go to her graduation, her wedding. She was supposed to grow old with me. The prosecutor nodded sympathetically. And what would you like to see happen to the defendant? Daniel looked at Ava then, seeing not the powerful CEO but the broken woman who had sung those same nighttime songs to Emma and Ella, who had taught them to read, who had so many plans that would never come to fruition. I want justice, he said finally. But I also have to think about 3 little girls who need stability, who need love, who didn't ask for any of this. The defendant's daughters have no other family. If she agrees, I'm willing to take temporary custody of them while she serves her sentence. The courtroom erupted in shocked whispers. The judge called for order, banging his gavel repeatedly. Ava's lawyer leaned over to whisper urgently in her ear, but she was staring at Daniel with an expression of profound disbelief and overwhelming gratitude. "Miss Blake," the judge addressed her sternly, "Mr. Carter is offering to care for your children despite the tremendous wrong you've done to him. Do you agree to this arrangement?" Ava stood slowly on unsteady legs. "Your Honor, Mr. Carter has every reason to hate me, to want me to suffer as he has suffered, that he would offer to care for my daughters despite what I've done to him and his family. Yes, I agree. And I ask only that he love them as he loves his own daughter." The judge sentenced Ava to 12 years in federal prison, with the possibility of parole in 7 for good behavior. As the bailiffs led her away in shackles, she turned to look at Daniel one last time. "Thank you," she mouthed silently, tears streaming down her face. Daniel nodded once, then turned to face his new reality, single father to 3 girls, bound together by tragedy and chance. The first months were the hardest trial Daniel had faced since losing Sophia. Emma and Ella cried themselves to sleep most nights, calling for their mother in heartbreaking wails. Lily, trying desperately to be helpful, would climb into their bed and hold them, but sometimes she cried too, confused by the tsunami of sadness that had invaded their previously happy home. Daniel survived on coffee and sheer determination, learning to braid 2 more heads of hair, pack 2 more lunches, attend 2 more sets of parent-teacher conferences, navigate 2 more sets of emotional needs. He never spoke badly of Ava in front of the girls, no matter how much anger still burned in his chest. When they asked about her, he told them she was somewhere she needed to be, that she loved them very much, that she would come back when she could. He helped them write letters to her every week, carefully printing their words when their small hands grew tired, adding drawings and photographs from their daily lives. The letters Ava sent back were always addressed to all 3 girls equally. She told them stories about a family of birds that lived outside her window, about the books she was reading in the prison library, about how much she missed them all. She always ended the same way: be good for each other. Be kind. Tell the truth. I love you to the moon and back. Slowly, painfully, a routine emerged from the chaos. Breakfast at 7, always chaos with spilled juice and arguments over cereal. School drop-off at 8:15, Emma and Ella holding Lily's hands protectively. Work for Daniel while the girls were at school. Grateful his employer understood his situation and allowed flexibility. Pick up at 3, homework at the kitchen table, with Daniel patiently explaining math concepts 3 times over. Dinner at 6, with each girl taking turns choosing the menu. Bedtime stories for all 3, even though Lily claimed she was too old, secretly loving the tradition. Collapse on the couch at 9, wondering how single parents survived this marathon. Wake up and do it again. But there were moments of unexpected grace too. The first time Emma called him Dad by accident, then blushed furiously, and he told her it was okay, she could call him whatever felt right. Ella's pride when she learned to ride a bike without training wheels, Daniel running beside her, Lily teaching the twins constellation names in the backyard, patient as her father. Saturday pancakes became sacred tradition, each girl getting to add 1 ingredient, resulting in combinations that ranged from delicious to decidedly experimental. Sunday afternoons at the park where it all began, the girls playing while Daniel sat on the bench and watched, sometimes remembering Sophia, sometimes remembering Ava, mostly just grateful for the present moment. The community, initially scandalized by the unconventional arrangement, gradually came to accept and even admire it. Daniel Carter, the man raising his wife's killer's children, it had a poetic justice to it that appealed to people's sense of drama and redemption. Donations appeared on their doorstep clothes the twins had outgrown. Casseroles on particularly hard days. Offers to babysit when Daniel looked especially exhausted. 2 years passed in a blur of school plays, soccer games, and birthday parties. Then 3. Then 4. The twins were 10 now, Lily almost 11. They'd grown tall and confident, Emma showing Ava's determination and strategic mind. Ella her attention to detail and artistic eye, Lily had become the protective older sister, fierce in defense of her twins as she called them, teaching them her mother's songs. On a rainy Saturday morning, 4 years into Ava's sentence, Daniel gathered all 3 girls in the living room for a family meeting. "I have something important to ask you all," he said seriously. The prison called. "Your mom is allowed visitors now, family visitors. It's been 4 years. Do you want to see her?" The twins looked at each other with that telepathic communication unique to twins, then at Lily, then back at Daniel. "All of us?" Emma asked quietly, her voice hopeful, but uncertain. "All of us," Daniel confirmed. "If you want to go." "Do you want to go?" Ella asked him. Always the most perceptive of the 3. Daniel was quiet for a moment, wrestling with his own complicated emotions. "I think it's important for you to see her. As for me, I think it's time." The Federal Women's Facility was 2 hours away through rural countryside. The girls were quiet in the car, dressed in their best clothes as if for church or a school performance. Daniel had prepared them for what to expect: the security, the rules, the way their mother might look different. He hadn't prepared himself for the way his chest would tighten when he saw her through the reinforced glass. Ava had lost significant weight, her face thinner, her hair shorter and streaked with premature gray. But when she saw them through the reinforced glass, her whole being lit up with a joy that transformed her features. The girls ran to the window, pressing their hands against it desperately. Ava did the same from her side, trying to touch them through the barrier. "My babies," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Look how big you've gotten. Look how beautiful you are." They talked for the full hour aloud, the girls telling her about school, friends, their soccer teams, their art projects. Lily showed her a report card. All A's. Emma had lost a tooth. Ella had learned to play piano. Normal childhood things that Ava had missed. Drinking in every word, like water in the desert. "Mom," Emma said as their time ran short, "don't cry anymore. We're okay. Daniel takes good care of us." Ava's eyes moved to Daniel, who had stayed silent throughout the visit. "I know he does, baby. He's a good man, the best man." "I'm still angry," Daniel said suddenly, his first words to her in 4 years. "I'll probably always be angry, but I want you to know that they're loved, they're safe, they're happy. I keep my promises." "I know," Ava whispered. "The guards? They tell me sometimes. About the Father's Day cards the girls make you. About the science fair project you helped Emma with. About how you drove 5 hours to find the specific doll Ella wanted for her birthday. You're their father now, in every way that matters. They need their mother too," Daniel said quietly. "We'll come once a month. All of us." The visits became routine, woven into the fabric of their unusual family life. Once a month, they would make the drive. The girls would chatter excitedly, planning what to tell their mother. Daniel would listen to audiobooks, trying to quiet his conflicted emotions. Each visit grew a little easier, the initial awkwardness fading into something resembling normalcy. 3 more years passed. The girls were teenagers now, 13 and almost 14, navigating the complexities of middle school with its dramas and heartbreaks. They still shared a room by choice, still held hands when they were nervous, still crawled into Daniel's bed during thunderstorms. On the 7th anniversary of Sophia's death, Daniel stood at her grave with all 3 girls. They'd brought butterflies to release, monarchs that Sophia had loved. As the orange wings dispersed into the spring sky, Lily spoke. "I remember her a little," she said softly. "She smelled like vanilla, and she sang off-key, but with her whole heart. She would have loved Emma and Ella. She would have understood why you kept them, Dad." Daniel pulled all 3 girls close. "Yeah," he said softly. "She would have." That evening, a letter arrived from Ava's lawyer. She had been approved for early release, time reduced for good behavior, and the prison education programs she'd completed. She would be out in 6 months. Daniel sat at the kitchen table long after the girls had gone to bed, staring at the letter. 7 years would have passed since that day in the park by the time of her release. The girls would be 14, old enough to choose where they wanted to live, old enough to understand the complexities of forgiveness and family. When he told the girls about Ava's early release, their reactions were mixed. Emma was thrilled, already planning her mother's homecoming. Ella was anxious, worried about how everything would change. Lily was protective, concerned about Daniel. "What do you want?" she asked him one evening as they did dishes together. "I want you all to be happy," Daniel said honestly. "That's all I've ever wanted." "That's not an answer, Dad." Daniel smiled at his wise daughter. "I don't know what I want, but I know what's right. Your mom," he still called Ava their mom to all 3 girls, "she's paid for what she did. She deserves a chance to rebuild her life, to be a mother again." The day of Ava's release came on a bright October morning. Daniel drove alone to pick her up, the girls waiting at home. Ava walked out carrying a small bag, wearing clothes that hung loose on her thin frame. She stopped when she saw Daniel by the car, uncertainty written across her face. "Thank you," she said simply. "For coming. For everything." "The girls are waiting," Daniel replied, opening the passenger door for her. They drove in silence for a while, the weight of 7 years sitting between them. Finally, Ava spoke. "I've thought about this day every moment for 7 years. What I would say to you, how I could possibly make amends. But there are no words, are there? No apology that could ever be enough." "No," Daniel agreed. "There aren't. I know I have no right to ask anything of you. But I need to know what happens now. With the girls? With us?" Daniel pulled over then, turning to face her fully. "The girls need their mother. They've needed you every day for 7 years, and I've done my best, but I'm not you. Emma needs someone who understands her drive, her ambition. Ella needs someone who sees the world in the detailed way she does. They need you. And Lily? Lily is my daughter. But she loves your girls like sisters. She's chosen to be part of this complicated family we've created. So here's what I propose. Shared custody. You get an apartment nearby. The girls can choose where they want to be and when. We cooperate. We coexist. We do what's best for them. And you and I?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know, Ava. I loved you once. Part of me probably still does. But that love is tangled up with so much pain, so much anger. Maybe someday, but not now. Maybe not ever." When they arrived at the house, the girls rushed out, Emma and Ella crashing into their mother with 7 years of pent-up hugs. Lily hung back until Ava held out an arm to her too, pulling her into the embrace. "My girls," Ava whispered. "My 3 beautiful girls." 6 months later, life had found a new rhythm. Ava had a small apartment 10 minutes away, working as a bookkeeper for a local nonprofit. The twins spent weekdays with her, weekends with Daniel and Lily. Sometimes they all had dinner together, awkward affairs that were slowly becoming less awkward. On a spring evening, Daniel found a letter in his mailbox, Ava's handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a single page. "Daniel, I won't ask for forgiveness because I know I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that every day of my freedom is a gift I don't take lightly. When I see you with our daughters, and yes, they are ours now, all 3 of them, I see the man Sophia loved, the father you've become, the grace you've shown when you had every right to choose hatred. I don't hope for your forgiveness. I don't hope for your love. I only hope that someday, when you think of me, the pain lessens just a little, that when you see our girls laughing together, you feel more joy than sorrow, that you know Sophia would be proud of the man you are, the father you've become, the family you've saved." With endless gratitude and respect, Ava. Daniel stood in his kitchen, letter in hand, watching through the window as the 4 most important people in his world played in the backyard. The sun was setting, painting everything golden. It wasn't the life he'd planned. It wasn't the family he'd chosen. But it was real. And it was his. And maybe that was enough. The camera of life pulled back slowly, revealing the tableau 4 figures in the dying light. A makeshift family born of tragedy, but sustained by love. Daniel stepped outside, and Lily immediately grabbed his hand, pulling him into their circle. In the distance, a monarch butterfly landed on the fence, wings catching the last rays of sun before lifting off into the vast sky. Daniel thought of Sophia, of the life they'd lost. Then he looked at the faces around him and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the ending anyone would have chosen, but perhaps the ending they all needed. A family not perfect, but present. Not whole, but healing. Not planned, but possible. The rain hammered downtown Seattle as James Carter ran toward the most important interview of his life, his only suit already soaked through. A red Mercedes sat crooked against the curb. A woman in a brilliant orange dress stepped out and immediately went down hard, her ankle twisting as her heel caught in a storm drain. Cars splashed past. Nobody stopped. James checked his watch 17 minutes until his interview. He looked at the woman struggling to stand in the downpour, closed his eyes knowing what this would cost him, then ran back. James Carter hadn't always been the kind of man who worked 3 part-time jobs to keep the lights on. 5 years ago, he'd been lead engineer at Boeing's experimental propulsion division, designing systems that would revolutionize commercial aviation. His corner office had overlooked Mount Rainier on clear days, which in Seattle meant maybe twice a month. But when that mountain appeared through the clouds, James would stop whatever he was doing and stare. It reminded him that some things were worth waiting for, worth working toward, even when they seemed impossibly distant. He'd met Sarah at a conference on sustainable aviation. She'd been presenting a paper on biofuels, stumbling over her words when the projector failed, her face flushing red as she tried to explain complex molecular structures without her carefully prepared slides. James had stood up from the 3rd row, walked to the front, and fixed the projector in 30 seconds. She'd looked at him with such gratitude that he'd forgotten how to walk back to his seat properly, bumping into 2 chairs and nearly knocking over someone's coffee. After her presentation, she'd found him at the coffee station. "My hero," she'd said, and he'd spilled sugar all over his shoes trying to play it cool. They were married 14 months later in her parents' backyard in Spokane. Sarah wore her grandmother's dress, altered to fit but still smelling faintly of lavender and age. James had written his own vows but forgotten them completely the moment he saw her walking toward him, settling instead for promising to love her, fix her projectors, and try not to spill things when she made him nervous. The crowd had laughed. Sarah had cried. Her father had clapped him on the shoulder afterward and said, "Take care of her," as if James could imagine doing anything else. Their house in Queen Anne was a 1,942nd craftsman that needed everything fixed. James spent weekends learning plumbing from YouTube videos, rewiring outlets with the power off, and Sarah standing nervously in the doorway with a flashlight. She painted every room a different color, bold choices that shouldn't have worked but did: forest green in the bedroom, deep purple in the bathroom, a shade of yellow in the kitchen that she insisted was butterscotch dream, but looked exactly like mustard to James. He loved it all because she loved it. When Sarah got pregnant, she documented everything in a journal that would later become James's most treasured possession. Every kick, every craving, every 3 a.m. moment when she'd wake him to put his hand on her belly and feel their son doing gymnastics. She'd written that James thought the baby would be an engineer like him, the way he was always moving, always building something in there. But she knew better. This little one was going to be an artist. She could feel it in the way he responded to music, to her voice, to the rain on the windows. Liam arrived during a thunderstorm, 2 weeks early and in a hurry. The birth was complicated. Sarah hemorrhaged badly enough that they rushed her into emergency surgery. James stood in the hallway, holding his minutes-old son, watching through a window as doctors worked to save his wife. A nurse found him there an hour later, still standing, still holding Liam, tears streaming down his face. "She's okay," the nurse said. "She's asking for you both." James had never run so fast in his life, even carrying a baby. Those first 2 years blurred together in James's memory like watercolors running in the rain. Sarah singing Liam to sleep with made-up songs about elephants who wore fancy hats. James building increasingly elaborate block towers for Liam to demolish with prehistoric glee. Sunday mornings at Pike Place Market, Liam in a carrier on James's chest. Sarah buying too many flowers because she couldn't choose just one bouquet. She'd been teaching kindergarten then, coming home covered in finger paint and glitter. Stories about 5-year-olds who thought butterflies were just fancy moths, and that marriage meant someone who'd share their fruit snacks. The day Sarah died, it had also been raining. James remembered that detail with painful clarity, how she'd kissed him goodbye that morning. Tasting of coffee and cinnamon toast, complaining that her umbrella had broken and she'd have to make a run for it from the parking lot. He'd offered her his umbrella. She'd refused, saying he needed it more for his big presentation that afternoon. They'd had a playful argument about it, ending with her pushing him out the door. Laughing, "Go change the world, engineer man. I'll just change some 5-year-old's pants when they have an accident." Those were her last words to him. About pants. The call came at 2:47 p.m. James knew the exact time because he'd been checking his watch, waiting for his turn to present to the board. Sarah had collapsed during story time. By the time the ambulance arrived at the school, she was gone. Brain aneurysm. Instant. Painless. They assured him. As if that mattered. As if the fact that she didn't suffer somehow made it better that she was gone. That Liam would grow up without her. That James would wake up alone for the rest of his life in their mustard-yellow kitchen. The funeral was a blur. Sarah's parents took Liam for a week while James sat in his house, surrounded by her colors, her flowers dying in vases, her coffee cup still in the sink with lipstick on the rim. He tried to go back to work. But sitting in meetings about profit margins and production schedules felt like betrayal. His boss gave him extended leave. HR sent flowers. His team lead said to take all the time he needed. But what James needed was to be a father, fully and completely, without distractions or divided loyalty. The real reason for leaving Boeing was darker than grief. 3 months before Sarah's death, James had discovered critical safety flaws in the new 787 production line, specific stress points in the fuselage that could cause catastrophic failure under certain flight conditions. He'd run the simulations dozens of times, hoping he was wrong. He wasn't. He reported it through proper channels, expecting immediate action. Instead, his supervisor, Thomas Marshall, buried the report. Production deadlines were more important than hypothetical risks, Marshall said. The planes were already sold. The contracts were signed. The stock price couldn't take the hit. James threatened to go to the FAA directly. That's when things got ugly. Suddenly, there were discrepancies in his expense reports from years ago. Small amounts, easily explained, but made to look like a pattern. There were questions about his mental state after Sarah's death, suggestions that grief had made him paranoid, unstable. Marshall offered him a choice. Resign quietly with a modest severance and keep his reputation, or be fired for embezzlement and blacklisted from the entire industry. With Liam to think about, James took the deal. 6 months later, he heard through former colleagues that the safety issues had been quietly fixed after a near disaster during a test flight. No one ever admitted James had been right. His resignation letter was 2 sentences. "I appreciate the opportunities Boeing has provided. My son needs me more." His boss tried to talk him out of it, offered part-time work, consulting, anything to keep his expertise. But James had made up his mind. The corner office was just a room. The 6-figure salary was just numbers. Liam was everything. The house sold quickly in Seattle's hot market. James found a 2-bedroom apartment in Northgate, close to a good elementary school. He drove Uber during school hours, the same streets he used to navigate in his BMW, now covered in a 10-year-old Camry that smelled perpetually of other people's coffee. He stocked shelves at Target overnight when Liam stayed with Sarah's parents. He did freelance technical writing at the kitchen table, translating engineering specifications into plain English, while Liam slept down the hall. Victoria Lane had been groomed for greatness since birth. though she'd never been asked if greatness was what she wanted. Her father, Marcus Lane, had started his defense contracting company in a garage in Tacoma with nothing but a laptop and a security clearance from his Navy days. By the time Victoria was 5, Lane Dynamics had its first Pentagon contract. By the time she was 10, they'd moved to a mansion in Medina with gates and guards and a view of Lake Washington that cost more than most people's entire homes. Marcus raised Victoria like he was training a successor, not raising a daughter. Dinner conversations were about market strategies and hostile takeovers. Bedtime stories were annual reports and acquisition proposals. When other girls were playing with dolls, Victoria was sitting in board meetings, silent but absorbing everything. She learned to read people's faces during negotiations, to spot weakness in a contract clause, to understand that power wasn't about money. It was about information and the will to use it. Her mother, Evelyn, had left when Victoria was 12. The divorce was quick and quiet, sealed records and non-disclosure agreements. Victoria found out from a gossip blog that her mother had moved to Italy with her art dealer lover. Marcus's only comment was, "She lacked focus." Victoria learned not to lack focus. She learned to be perfect, controlled, necessary. She learned to be everything except happy. Wharton at 18 was Marcus's idea, but Victoria threw herself into it with desperate intensity. She graduated in 3 years, summa cum laude, with a thesis on emerging defense technologies that got attention from the Pentagon. Her professors said she was brilliant. Her classmates said she was terrifying. Both were true. She returned to Seattle with her MBA at 21, stepping directly into a vice president role at Lane Dynamics that everyone knew had been created specifically for her. The company became her entire world. She lived in a penthouse apartment 10 minutes from the office, though she often just slept on the couch in her executive suite. She knew every contract, every employee's name, every line item and every budget. When Marcus had his first heart attack at 62, Victoria took over seamlessly. When he returned 4 months later, he found she'd increased profits by 18% and secured 3 new government contracts. "Good," he said. Nothing more. Victoria had tried relationships in the clinical way she approached everything else. Men from appropriate backgrounds, with appropriate portfolios and appropriate ambitions. David, the investment banker who spoke 4 languages but couldn't hold a conversation about anything except money. Richard, the tech CEO who brought his laptop to bed and checked stock prices during intimate moments. Thomas, the senator's son who proposed on their 6th date with a ring worth more than most houses and a prenuptial agreement already drafted. She'd said yes to Thomas because it made sense, because Marcus approved, because it was what she was supposed to do. The engagement lasted 4 months. She found Thomas with her best friend, her only friend, really in his apartment, in the bed where Victoria had tried so hard to feel something beyond mild satisfaction and a vague sense of checking off a box marked intimacy. The betrayal should have hurt more than it did. Instead, Victoria felt relief. She didn't have to pretend anymore, at least not about that. Marcus's death came suddenly, unlike everything else in his calculated life. The FBI raid on Lane Dynamics headquarters was for charges Victoria hadn't seen coming: 20 years of systematic bribery. Defense officials bought and sold like commodities. Marcus had built his empire on a foundation of corruption so deep, so systemic, that Victoria hadn't even known to look for it. He'd hidden it from her. Or maybe she'd hidden it from herself. All those signs she'd chosen not to see. When the agents burst into the building, Marcus had been in the lobby, coming back from lunch. The stress triggered a massive coronary. Victoria ran from her office, her heels clicking on marble, reaching him as he collapsed. She held him on that cold floor, his blood spreading across her white suit, while federal agents stood around them with their guns and their warrants and their careful expressions. Marcus grabbed her wrist hard enough to leave bruises that lasted weeks. "Don't let them take it," he gasped. "Don't let them win." Those were his last words. Not "I love you," not "I'm sorry," just business, even dying. The aftermath nearly destroyed everything. The stock price plummeted 60% in 3 days. The board called emergency meeting after emergency meeting, half of them demanding Victoria's resignation. The media painted her as either complicit or incompetent, neither option leaving room for the truth, that she'd been so desperate for her father's approval that she'd made herself blind to his methods. Federal investigators combed through everything, looking for evidence of her involvement. They found nothing, because there was nothing to find. Victoria had been many things for her father, but never his confidant. He'd never trusted her that much. She saved the company through sheer force of will and strategic brutality. She fired every executive who'd known about the bribes. She brought in a new compliance team, giving them unprecedented power to investigate and report. She personally testified before Congress for 12 hours, answering every question with precision and ice-cold composure that made headlines. "The Ice Queen cometh," one paper wrote. She cut the article out and framed it, a reminder that survival sometimes meant becoming exactly what they said you were. But at night, in her glass penthouse that felt more like a terrarium for displaying a rare specimen than a home, Victoria fell apart. She'd have panic attacks in her bathroom, sitting on Italian marble that cost more than most annual salaries, sobbing until she couldn't breathe. She'd stand on her balcony, 30 floors up, and wonder what it would feel like to step off, to stop fighting for once. She never did it. Not because she wanted to live, but because dying felt like letting them win, and Marcus had taught her never to let anyone win. The morning she met James, she'd been driving to another emergency board meeting. Richard Donnelly, her largest individual shareholder and most vocal critic, had called it to discuss leadership concerns. Victoria knew he wanted her gone, replaced with someone he could control. She'd been strategizing her counterattack when the rain started, sudden and violent, the kind of Seattle storm that made driving feel like swimming. She'd pulled over to wait it out, too distracted by the conference call she was managing to raise the convertible's top, when she stepped out of the car and her heel caught. When she went down hard on wet concrete. Something inside her broke that had nothing to do with her ankle. She lay there for a moment, rain soaking through her designer dress, watching people walk past without stopping, and thought, "This is my life. I could disappear right here, and the only people who'd care would be the ones afraid of losing their jobs." The pain in her ankle was almost welcome, at least it was real, immediate, something she could point to and say, "This hurts." Then James appeared, running the wrong direction, and everything changed. The way he helped her up was so gentle, so careful, like she was something precious that might break more. His suit was cheap, probably off the rack from a decade ago, but he wore it with dignity. His hands were calloused. She could feel them through her dress as he supported her weight, but they were steady, sure. He didn't recognize her, she could tell. To him, she was just a woman who needed help. The simplicity of that, the purity of it, made her want to cry. He half carried her to the Starbucks, his arm around her waist, taking most of her weight without being asked. He smelled like rain and drugstore shampoo and something else. Something warm and safe that reminded her of her grandfather's workshop before he died, before Marcus turned her into this. James found her a chair, knelt in front of her without caring that his knees were getting soaked from the puddle on the floor, and examined her ankle with surprising expertise. "You've done this before," she said. "My son's very active," he replied, not looking up from her ankle. "I've gotten good at first aid. A son." Of course he had a family, a life, somewhere to be that wasn't here with her. "Your meeting," she said, remembering how he'd been running. "You're going to be late." He looked at his watch, and she saw him deflate, shoulders dropping like someone had cut his strings. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I am." "Go," Victoria said. "I'm fine. Go." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw him make a decision that would cost him everything. "You're not fine," he said simply, "and they won't reschedule. It's their policy, so it doesn't matter anymore." He stayed until she insisted she could manage, until she'd called her driver, though she actually just pretended to call, too embarrassed to admit she'd been planning to drive herself home in this condition. When he left, she watched him walk back into the rain, his ruined suit clinging to him, his shoulders squared despite what he'd just lost. She didn't even know his name. Victoria sat in that Starbucks for an hour, her ankle throbbing, replaying the moment over and over. The way he'd turned back, the resignation in his voice when he'd said it didn't matter anymore. The careful way he'd touched her ankle, like he was trained to heal things, not hurt them. When was the last time someone had chosen her, not her money, Not her company, not her connections, just her over something that mattered to them. By that evening, she'd had her security team pull the traffic camera footage. The facial recognition software found him in minutes. James Carter, 35, widowed, one son. The public records told a story that made her chest tight. Brilliant engineer at Boeing. Rising star. Multiple patents pending. Wife deceased brain aneurysm. Age 31. Resignation from Boeing, immediately following her death. Current employment. Multiple part-time positions. Current residence. Northgate. Average rent for a two-bedroom in that area, less than what Victoria spent on lunch most days. But it was the Boeing file that made her sit up straight. Her head of security had connections everywhere. It was part of what she paid him for. The real story wasn't in the official records. James had discovered critical safety flaws in the new 787 production line, the kind that could cause catastrophic failure under specific conditions. He'd reported it through proper channels. His supervisors had buried it, choosing production deadlines over passenger safety. When James threatened to go to the FAA, they destroyed him. Accusations of embezzlement, mental instability following his wife's death, a complete character assassination that ensured he'd never work in aerospace again. Victoria pulled up the security footage again, watched him turn back in the rain. This man had already sacrificed his career once for doing the right thing. He'd just done it again. For a stranger. She made a decision that went against every professional instinct Marcus had drilled into her. She was going to find James Carter and make this right. 3 days later, Victoria knocked on James's apartment door at 7 in the evening. The building was tired-looking. One of those 1,972nd complexes that had been renovated just enough to justify raising the rent, but not enough to actually improve anything. The hallway smelled like someone's dinner curry, maybe, or something with too much garlic. Children's voices echoed from somewhere above. This was so far from her world that Victoria almost turned back. But she knocked, and when James opened the door, the surprise on his face was worth the courage it had taken to come. He looked different in jeans and a t-shirt, younger, less formal. Behind him, she could see a small boy at a kitchen table, tongue poking out in concentration as he worked on something with crayons. "How did you?" James started. "I'm very good at finding people," Victoria said, which sounded more ominous than she'd intended. "May I come in?" The apartment was small, but meticulously clean. Toys organized in labeled bins. Children's artwork displayed on every wall, like a gallery. The furniture was old but well-maintained, everything arranged to maximize the limited space. It smelled like laundry detergent and apple juice, and something indefinable that she'd later recognize as the scent of a happy home. "Liam," James said to the boy, "this is Miss Lane. She's someone from Daddy's work." "You don't have work today," Liam pointed out with 5-year-old logic. "She's from potential work," James corrected, and Victoria saw him flush slightly. Liam studied her with his father's serious eyes. "Are you the lady with the hurt foot?" Victoria blinked. "How did you?" "Daddy said he helped a lady with a hurt foot, and that's why he was late to his meeting, and they said he couldn't have the job, but it was okay because helping people is more important than jobs." Liam delivered this in one breath, then added, "Do you want to see my dinosaur collection?" "Maybe later, buddy," James said quickly. "Why don't you finish your picture?" Liam returned to his coloring, but Victoria noticed he kept glancing at her with curious eyes. She pulled out the folder she'd prepared, set it on James's coffee table, a piece that had probably been new when Clinton was president. "I want to hire you," she said without preamble. "Technical consulting for Lane Dynamics. Reviewing our aerospace contracts, ensuring quality control. Preventing the kind of disasters Boeing tried to hide." James's face went carefully neutral. "You looked me up. I look everyone up. But yes, I know what happened at Boeing. I know you were right. I know what it cost you." She paused. "And I know you deserve better than stocking shelves at Target when you could be saving lives. I'm not in a position to take a traditional job. My son needs stability. Routine. I can't do 60-hour weeks or travel." "I'm not offering you a traditional job," Victoria interrupted. "Remote work, completely flexible hours. You work when Liam's at school or asleep. No office requirement. No travel unless you choose it. The salary's in the folder, along with benefits that include dependent coverage. James opened the folder, and she saw his eyes widen at the number. It was more than generous. It was life-changing. But his face remained troubled. "Why?" he asked. "You don't know me. One interaction in the rain doesn't—" "You turned back," Victoria said simply. "In the rain, late for something important. You turned back to help someone you didn't know. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. The fact that you're also brilliant at what you do is just a bonus." She stood to leave, pulling out her business card. "Call me when you decide." At the door, she turned back. "The man who forced you out at Boeing? Thomas Marshall? When? He works for my biggest competitor now. Just thought you should know that helping me means beating him." After she left, James sat at his kitchen table, staring at the contract while Liam colored beside him. The salary would mean he could stop driving Uber, stop stocking shelves, stop worrying about making rent every month. It would mean Liam could have the things other kids had: new clothes that fit properly, birthday parties that weren't just cake from a box, maybe even college savings someday. But more than that, it would mean doing work that mattered again, using his brain for something more than translating technical manuals. The handwritten note at the bottom of the contract decided him. Second, chances don't come often. Trust me. I know. V. James called Victoria 2 days later to accept the position. He started immediately, working from his laptop at the kitchen table while Liam was at school. The first contract he reviewed was for a new drone guidance system. He found 17 critical flaws in the first hour. Issues that could have caused navigation failures in combat situations. His report was thorough, meticulous, and so well written that Victoria forwarded it to the entire board with a note. "This is why we need people who care more about quality than quotas." The calls started as professional check-ins. Victoria would phone to discuss a contract detail, and somehow they'd end up talking for an hour about everything else. She learned that James sang Beatles songs in the shower. Badly, but with enthusiasm. He learned that she'd never learned to ride a bike, because Marcus thought it was a waste of time. She learned that he read Liam 3 stories every night, doing different voices for all the characters even though it made his throat hurt. He learned that she had panic attacks that she hid in bathroom stalls, breathing into paper bags from the sandwich shop downstairs. 6 weeks into their working relationship, Victoria showed up at the apartment on a Saturday morning with a box of pastries from the French bakery downtown. "I was in the neighborhood," she said, which was absurd since her neighborhood and his were separated by several tax brackets and a large body of water. Liam answered the door in dinosaur pajamas that had seen better days. "The foot lady," he announced with delight. "Dad, the foot lady brought food. Her name is Miss Lane." James called from the kitchen, where something was burning. "Victoria," she corrected, entering without invitation. The kitchen was a disaster: eggs stuck to a pan, smoke alarm threatening to go off. James looking harassed in an apron that said Dad's Kitchen in a child's handwriting. "I was trying to make omelets," he said helplessly. "Step aside," Victoria said, surprising herself. She hadn't cooked in years. There'd never been a reason to. But suddenly, she wanted to. She saved the eggs, though they became scrambled rather than an omelet. She found cheese in the fridge, some vegetables that were on the edge of acceptable, and made something that resembled actual food. They ate together at the small table. Liam chattering about school, about his best friend Marcus, who could burp the alphabet, about how his teacher Mrs. Chen had a baby in her tummy that was going to come out soon. Victoria found herself listening with genuine interest, asking questions that made Liam light up with excitement. James watched them both with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Do you have kids?" Liam asked suddenly, mouth full of egg. "No," Victoria said. "Why not?" "Liam," James warned. "It's okay," Victoria said. "Though it wasn't. Not really. I guess I've been too focused on work to have a family." Liam considered this with the seriousness only a 5-year-old could muster. "That's sad," he pronounced. "Everyone should have family, like me and Dad. We're small, but we're good." Victoria's eyes burned with unexpected tears. "Yes," she said quietly. "You are." These visits became a pattern neither of them acknowledged. Victoria would appear with some excuse contracts to review. Educational toys for Liam she happened to see. Soup, when James mentioned feeling under the weather. She learned the rhythm of their life. Breakfast at 7, school drop-off at 8:15, lunch at noon sharp, because Liam got cranky if it was late. Dinner at 6, bath at 7, stories at 7:30, lights out by 8. She learned smaller things too. James couldn't sleep without checking on Liam at least twice. Liam was afraid of the vacuum cleaner but pretended he wasn't. They had pizza every Friday and watched movies on James's laptop because the television had broken months ago and fixing it wasn't a priority. James still wore his wedding ring on a chain around his neck, tucked under his shirt where no one could see. Liam had his mother's eyes, but his father's way of tilting his head when thinking hard about something. In return, though she didn't realize she was doing it, Victoria revealed herself. She told James about the panic attacks that started after Marcus died. How she'd sit in bathroom stalls breathing into paper bags, counting to 10 in different languages to calm herself. She told him about the engagement that ended when she found her fiancé with her best friend, how the betrayal had been less painful than the relief she'd felt at having an excuse to end it. She told him about standing on her balcony at 3 in the morning, wondering if anyone would notice if she just disappeared. They would, James said quietly when she admitted that. Liam and I would. 4 months after that first rainy morning, everything shifted. It was a Thursday evening, and Victoria had come over to review quarterly projections, but ended up helping Liam build a pillow fort that took over the entire living room. She was crawling out from under it, laughing at something Liam had said about dragons who wore business suits to trick people, when she looked up to find James watching her with an expression that made her forget how to breathe. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. Her hair was a mess, her designer blouse untucked, her makeup probably smeared. "You're different here," he said softly. "You're yourself." "Is that bad?" "No," James said, his voice rough with something she didn't want to name. "It's perfect." The moment stretched between them, fragile and terrifying and absolutely right. Then Liam announced he needed to pee right now, and it shattered. Victoria left soon after. But they both knew something had fundamentally changed. They were no longer employer and contractor, or even friends. They were something else, something neither had words for yet. The crisis that brought everything to a head came from Richard Donnelly. He'd been maneuvering against Victoria since Marcus died, but she'd always been one step ahead. This time, he'd found what he thought was a killing blow. The board meeting was scheduled for Tuesday morning. Victoria arrived to find the conference room full every board member, several major shareholders, and Donnelly himself, looking like a cat who'd cornered a mouse. He placed a folder on the table, containing James's Boeing file with fabricated embezzlement charges, photos of Victoria at James's apartment, and psychological evaluations taken out of context to suggest instability. "You've hired a disgraced engineer with mental problems and financial crimes," Donnelly announced. "He has access to classified contracts. This is a security breach, but more than that, you're personally involved with him. Fire him or resign. You have 24 hours. Victoria drove straight to James's apartment and told him everything. "I'll resign immediately," James said. "Distance yourself. Say I misrepresented my qualifications. Number. This isn't your fight. Donnelly's connected to Marshall at Boeing, isn't he? This is about me." They argued until midnight. The next morning, James sent his resignation despite Victoria's protests. He ignored her calls and texts. Didn't answer when she came to the door. 24 hours after Donnelly's ultimatum, Victoria stood before the board. "Mr. Carter has resigned," she announced. "Smart choice," Donnelly said, already tasting victory. "I'm not finished." Victoria opened her laptop, connected it to the screen. The charges against James Carter were fabricated by Thomas Marshall, Your brother-in-law, Mr. Donnelly. The same Thomas Marshall, who's now CEO of Apex Dynamics. Our biggest competitor. The same man who's been feeding you inside information about our contracts. She showed email after email, evidence of $17 million in bribes, corporate espionage, stock manipulation. The FBI will be very interested in these communications, unless you resign immediately and divest all shares. Donnelly capitulated in 5 minutes and fled. Victoria turned to the remaining board members. James Carter is the most ethical man I've ever met. He sacrificed everything to prevent disasters. If we can't make room for people like that, what are we protecting? She paused. And yes, I'm in love with him. Anyone have a problem with that? The board voted unanimously to vindicate James completely. Victoria drove to James's apartment through rush-hour traffic. When he opened the door, she said, "It's done. Donnelly's gone. The truth is out. You're vindicated." "Dad, why is Victoria crying?" Liam asked from behind James. "Because your dad is an idiot," Victoria said. "A beautiful, noble, self-sacrificing idiot who thought I'd let him fall on his sword again. If Victoria loves you, you should probably say it back." Liam advised his father. "I love you too," James said to Victoria. "I have since you made those terrible scrambled eggs." James pulled her inside, into their small apartment that smelled like dinner, cooking, and home. 6 months later, Victoria sold her penthouse and bought a house in Wallingford with a yard perfect for the treehouse Liam had always wanted. The night before moving in together, she found James staring at a photo of Sarah. "She would have liked you," James said. "She had this way of seeing through to who people really were." "Marry me," James said suddenly. "Not now, but someday. Marry me." The actual proposal came from Liam months later. He approached Victoria one Saturday with a ring pop and serious expression. "Will you marry me and Dad? He's too chicken to ask properly, and I really want you to be my mom officially." Behind him, James held a real ring. "Yes," Victoria said, to both proposals. They married the following spring in their backyard, rain falling soft as a blessing. They exchanged vows under a small awning built to recreate where James first helped Victoria. Liam served as ring-bearer and best man. In his impromptu speech, Liam said, "If Dad hadn't stopped in the rain, he would have gotten that job. But we wouldn't have Victoria. So I'm glad Dad missed his interview. Sometimes the best things happen when stuff goes wrong." As evening ended, Victoria stood watching the rain with James beside her, Liam asleep in his arms. "Thank you for stopping," she whispered. "Thank you for being worth stopping for," he replied. The rain continued, soft as promise. They were complete. They were family. They were home.